Narito ang programang totoong-totoo, Tambayan sa DWIZ. Programang magliliwanag ng ilang mahahalagang mga issue. Tambayan sa DWIZ. At ngayon, narito na sila upang maghatid ng saya sa bawat Pilipino. Sa programang Tambayan sa DWIZ.
Magandang tanghali. Welcome to Tambayan. Ako si Trixie Cruz Angeles. We will be joined by Atty. Awesome Ahmed Paglinawan via Zoom as well. So, binabati ko lang po lahat ng mga sumusubaybay sa atin both sa Facebook Live and YouTube live streaming. Dito po nila IC text line is 0998-376-6768. Ulitin po natin, 0998-376-6768. We're also on Facebook Live and YouTube live streaming under DWIC 882 AM. Huwag pong kakalimutan, subscribe sa ating YouTube channel and follow dun sa Facebook page. Sama niyo na rin po yung Luminous by Trixie Cruz Angeles and Ahmed Paglinawan. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our Facebook page. In the meantime, itong video po natin, don't forget to like and share. Lalo-lalo na po yung mga nasa YouTube, nakakalimutan kasi i-like yung ating broadcast. Gayun din po dun sa ating mga nasa Facebook. Magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat. Huwag pong kakalimutan, like, share. Gandang exciting pa rin ang mga balita. Kanina pinag-uusapan natin sa Karambola, parang ginawang extension ng Karambola. No? Kanina pinag-uusapan natin sa Karambola yung mga constitutional amendments via the party list concerns, yung concerns natin about lawmaking and so on. But in the meantime, merong mga nagtanong kasi tungkol dito sa well, we discussed three cases, Senator Gordon's case, Enchong D's case, as well as the case of Senator Risa Hontiveros. What is good about these cases is that it is showing us now na hindi na po sacred cows parate ang ating mga legislators, hindi sila, what do you call this? Hindi sila untouchable na mula ngayon. Whether or not magka-prosper yung mga kaso, that is, yung may makikita tayo ng conviction dito, that remains to be seen. Yung kay Enchong, since it is a libel case, it is quite possible na he can be found guilty pero payment of fine lang. Tsaka damages doon na hinihingi nung nagreklamo. Of course, yung nagreklamo dito is a Congresswoman Claudine Bautista Lim. At dahil siya yung sinabihan na ginamit daw niya yung pondo para sa party list o yung pondo ng mga jeepney drivers para sa kanyang wedding dress. So medyo that is very clearly how do you call this, damaging, at saka it is clearly an unfounded insinuation, an unfounded accusation. In the meantime, kamusta lang muna ako kamusta po sa mga nakatambay sa atin dito sa YouTube at saka sa Facebook. Sa YouTube, magandang tanghali, Joanna Da Anton, Sinaida Javier, Ma'am Pinay Paparazzi, LMX, Leo, V. Via, Leo Greg Imperial, na good morning dun sa mga fur babies. Weda Balading, magandang tanghali po. Victor Tadeo, Mayla Adarne, Carmi Pinto, Ate Liz Vlogs, Jemshid Momar, Leo, Mel Mendoza, Chev, Michelle Soriano, Alfonso Magpayo, magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat. Magandang tanghali din sa ating mga sumusubaybay sa Facebook ng DWIC. RC Lasatin, Cyrene Pablo, Teresa Soledad. Di ko pa nakikita yung iba po sa inyo kasi mabagal yung sa ating Facebook. Apparently, mabagal yung pag-upload. I noticed there was an article that Mark Zuckerberg is one of, made a sizable donation to an NGO, ill-disguised NGO, that helped propel the candidacy of Joe Biden in the United States and help convert what was normally a Republican state into a Democrat one. So ang ano lang doon is there's still a debate on whether or not it is legal or illegal or semi-legal. They're still debating on that. But what is evident is that money certainly talks. So those who na malalaki yung mga binibigay na campaign yung malalaki ang natatanggap na campaign contributions, they have a lot of money that helps convince people. Now, this is not exactly illegal, but alam niyo yan, large contributions, well, how do we call this, gives the candidate a lot of leeway. Ngayon, kung titignan natin yung Uniteam, they are not exactly rolling in cash. What they are rolling in is in popularity. So, this is a good thing. Okay? Of course, kailangan pa rin natin magpatakbo ng kampanya. Kailangan natin and these things require money. Yung palang mobilize, yung pagpunta ng mga teams, pagka-set up ng mga securities, liaison work, and all of that. It does require some money. But the good thing is that social media has helped diminish those expenses. Alam niyo yung pinakamahal talaga? Yung sa broadcast, sa mga networks. Buti pa radyo, medyo mas mura sa radyo, pero television really is one of the is in fact the most expensive advertising medium. Nevertheless, it is also still one of those that are most effective. Whether we like it or not, kahit sabihin pa natin, may social media na, kahit sabihin pa natin na, yun nga, laganap ang social media, the farthest reach and one of the most effective means of communication is still television. Although, nag-umpisa na po yung transition towards social media, towards online entertainment. Which makes it significant na pinakikialaman ng ating Senado yung Public Service Act. Kasi they're putting in more categories into public service such as critical infrastructure, critical needs, something like that. Well, separate categories, what will constitute public utility, what will constitute what falls into other categories. And primarily, one of the reasons na binabago nila yung Public Service Act was to benefit ABS-CBN because telecoms might find it easier under the new Public Service Act to get in. Now, here's the problem. The problem is that we have seen the abuse of this system and in fact, they outline legal activities na hindi masyado nare-regulate even with the present setup where there is regulation and it requires yung tutok talaga na pagbibigay ng prangkisa. With the Drilon bill having passed to third reading dun sa Senado, it now goes into the Congress also. And this is something like a nail in the coffin on our capability to regulate this the television in particular. Remember, like I said, it remains one of the most effective pagdating sa pagbabago ng isip ng mga tao. So for those of you wondering kung bakit ang tataas pa rin ng ratings ng ibang ng ratings sa surveys ng ibang mga kandidato, even if tapong-tapo na sila, even if sawang-sawa na tayo sa kanila, humahataw pa rin sila sa surveys. And part of the reason is still television, which is why we always have to take a close look at it. Ngayon, part of the debate is still raging on social media tungkol sa ABS-CBN. There is in fact a party list that is embodying the move to bring ABS-CBN back on air. Why? This concerns us. It concerns us deeply because a lot of the old narrative was carried by this station. And ito yung nagtulong to help cloud a more objective assessment of every administration that has passed in this country. Marami pa rin tayong hindi alam tungkol sa mga pangyayari doon because they heavily editorialized their reporting of the news. I would like to point out that it was ABS-CBN who pioneered the news magazine format. News as entertainment. And because news was packaged as entertainment, it became a ratings game. Now, this is very dangerous for news programs. Kasi, you're not there to make people happy. You're not there for the hits. You're not there for the viewership. Kasi you're selling advertising. News programs should be given free of charge. Ito yung karga, ito yung isang obligasyon ng mga television stations na magbigay ng clear and objective news programs. Once they started selling advertising to these news, for these news programs, once they started making it a ratings game, yung mga storya na lumalabas ay hindi storya na necessarily na ikabubuti sa atin. Hindi necessarily yan yung mga storya na dapat nalalaman natin at pinipresenta in an objective manner. No. A lot of it has become sensationalist. Diba? May mga tono pa ng boses ng mga tao. Pasok! May mga gumaganyan pa. Because it's entertainment. Let's not delude ourselves into thinking that any of these stations, any of the channels will give us news that is objective. For so long as the news programs are selling advertising, it becomes a ratings game. At isa pa ito sa mga dapat kinukonsidera natin sa darating na eleksyon. Ano ba itong mga kandidatong ibinoboto natin? Are they pro-ABS-CBN or are they more objective? O sige, pwedeng bumalik ang ABS-CBN pero sumunod sila sa batas. Sumunod sila dun sa mga magpaparegulate sila. Otherwise, tsugi uli. Diba? Yun dapat ang approach natin dito. Magandang tanghali dun sa mga nasa Facebook at saka sa YouTube. Marami akong dinabate, lalo-lalo na dito sa Facebook. Sina Violi Ocampo, Bahaw, Risa Abella, Marlon Uy, Roberto Lomita, Violi Ocampo, Vulcan Waven, Ma'am Susan Geronimo, Neil Lin, nasa Italy, buongiorno, Cathy Gaceta, Artemio Esquivel Cruz, Ross Tan, Bong de Leon Carlos, Francisco Edna Cuiso. Ay dami ninyo sa sa Facebook ngayon, pero don't forget to like and share. Okay, lalong-lalo na dun sa Twitter para merong namang himatayan kahit paano. At tanghali sa mga nasa YouTube, kamusta po kayo dyan? Di ko kayo na masyado nababasa. Lila Olifernes says, tanong ko lang po, bakit di ko po naririnig sa radyo si Sir Edwin Eusebio? He's either still on leave or not, temporarily not with the station. Let me get the real lowdown on that one. I know that he took an indefinite leave, so he really will not be heard on radio. As to how long that leave is or if it's going to be permanent, I still have to find out. Also, wag natin pong kakalimutan yung cultural repercussions or artistic repercussions nitong ating one dominant station where they can actually dictate our tastes and then determine the level of artistic of art appreciation or the appreciation of more sophisticated tastes in our entertainment is largely the doing of the local stations. Huwag po nating kakalimutan yan. So kung may proliferation of really bad quality movies and TV shows, it's because there was never any serious attempt to raise the level or to create audiences that are willing to accept a higher level or a higher or more sophisticated, more nuanced, more artistic forms of entertainment. Sabi ni Chab, may hanasya na ang kapamilya party list. Dapat ang presidente ay lumalabas sa gitna ng kalamidad gaya ni Lenny, hindi yung nakasakay sa helicopter na ginagawa ni PRRD. Hindi lang kaya kasi ni Madam Lenny sumakay sa helicopter kasi I doubt if meron pang magpapasakay sa kanya uli. Maninira siya eh. Diba? Yung mga tao niya, hindi niya pinipigilan. When they make these really ridiculous claims, katulad nung isang na nasa Twitter sinabi, parang si Lenny lang daw ang nararamdaman na nagtatrabaho nitong nakaraan na disaster. Kaloka. So, what about our soldiers? Yung civil defense natin, yung AFP natin, the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, they were tireless in their efforts. Tuloy-tuloy, marami sa kanila hindi nakauwi sa kanilang mga pamilya. Pero of course, parang sila nilang ang nararamdaman ninyo. Excuse me, sila nilang kasi nare-report sa mass media, sa traditional media. Pero, diba, iinisin nyo talaga yung AFP saying that, and the Coast Guard, let's not forget the Coast Guard. Bakit kayo ganyan? So, Ah, sabi ni Clark Sam, bakit po nag-ads pa din ang iba sa ABS-CBN gayong wala naman silang prangkisa at wala naman sila sa ere? O maybe dahil nasa iba't ibang station sila kahit kalat-kalat. Okay, they bought airtime sa ibang station. That's what they did. So, but ABS-CBN as a television network no longer exists. They exist as a production company creating programs, and they exist as social media. On social media. They have a YouTube channel, they have Facebook, I understand they're on Twitter. But to say that ABS-CBN is still alive, the network, hindi na po. Kasi the reason for existence was television and radio. Remember, tatanggalan sila ng prangkisa, television and radio. Even Amkara, hindi pa po nabibigyan ng prangkisa yan. Yung ginagamit nila. Ito ba yung mga happy lunchtime, sabi ni Ma'am Michelle Soriano, galit ata mga dogs, tahol ng tahol. Actually, hindi sila galit sa akin. They're also working dogs. So, ibig sabihin, nakabanday sila sa gate, they chase out pests and all that. Magandang tanghali mga sutil, sabi ni Ma'am Pinay Paparazzi. Let me check on Facebook. Kamusta naman po kayo sa Facebook? Sabi ni Patrick Calvo, Happy New Year in advance. Ang nagtanong ko, simula mo po si Cory, nawala yung yung siren ng 7 a.m., 12 noon, 5 p.m. Noong panahon ni Apollo kay Marcos, merong yung elementary high school ako. I was born in 1967. I always used to think that was a factory siren. Pero it was, I'm not sure if that was it. That was a way of telling time. So after that, they started using that only for civil defense alarms, for alarms during disasters and so on. I don't know why wala na yan. Possibly because there are other means of communicating the emergency information. Ano pa po? Let me see. Sabi ni Eric, sana makagawa ang Pilipinas ng same platform ng FB. I agree. Sigurado papansinin pa niya niyan ang FB, lalo na't nangunguna ang Pilipinas sa paggamit ng social media. Sabi ni Volcan Raven, ABS-CBN is a yellow propaganda machine. We should not allow them to go back on air ever. Well, kasi kung ganyan ang pag-phrase natin, then they will say they're being oppressed. Kasi we should welcome, in a free marketplace of ideas, welcome lahat yan. Kahit yung mga dilaw, welcome lahat yung mga views nila. But there is a difference between hearing their views and allowing them to affect public policy, allowing them to flout the laws. Flout, wow, papagalitan na naman ako. Papayagan, yung pinapayagan sila na hindi na nga sila sumusunod sa batas, mayabang pa sila. Yun yung mga hindi natin dapat pinapayagan. Hindi dapat tayo tumututol sa mga kakaiba yung mga opinion sa atin. Ang tinututulan natin yung illegal nilang ginagawa. So it's the same, alam nyo, dun sa pagdating. It's like the argument against communism. We're against communism because it's a failed theory. Sa totoo lang. But it is not illegal to be a communist. It is illegal if you bear arms against the government. If you rise up against the duly constituted authorities. Kung maghihikayat tayo na tanggalan ng autoridad itong gobyerno, kung naghihikayat tayo na hindi sumunod sa batas, kung naghihikayat tayo na i-prevent yung makaupo sa opisina or makapasok sa opisina ang isang public official, yan po ay ang illegal. Illegal yung mga illegal acts. But the thought, you don't punish thought. You don't punish an ideology. You don't punish people for thinking a certain way. But you do punish if there are physical acts that they will undertake that are against the law. Ito sabi ni Megan Ayala, tama po sila. Paano po sila? Si Lenny lang nagtatrabaho sa camera. Ay, grabe. Magandang tanghali. Sabi ni Ferdinand Santos at mga tambay katulad ko, sana may pasang panukalang batas para sa yearly bonus ng mga tambay. Ay, grabe kayo. Isipin nila meron tayong bayad. Kasi kung may bonus ka, meron bayad. So, hahanapin ko yan, singilin ko kayo, nasan yung bayad natin. At sabi ni Alfie Bal, basta magbayad sila ng tamang taxes at baguhin ang format ng kanilang pinapalabas. At Gorky, ibalik mo na yung 86 million. Kaloka. Hi kay Sir Rene Braga, bayin ko na late daw siya. Ma'am Feli, magtibay, magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat. Oh, pagkakataon na. Ano yung mga tanong na hindi na pag-usapan kanina sa karambola? Hinahanap ko yung mga questions kanina, yung mga hindi ko nasagot sa karambola. Wala pa. Yung kanina may nagtatanong, kaya lang nagpa-flood siya, so hindi ko siya masagot kanina sa karambola. Pero ang tinatanong niya is, kung sang-ayon ako sa divorce. I think that, not only has that ship sailed, it's already landed somewhere else. Yes, I am pro-divorce. I find it unusual that the state would involve itself in the personal relations of any person, of any persons. Parang, ang crowded naman ang kasal natin. Ikaw, ako, tapos kasama pa yung gobyerno nakikialam. Excuse me. Tapos sabi ni Joy, sa tatlong magkakapatid na Marcos, si Amy lang ang nakikita kong magaling maglaro sa politika, kaya bukas siya sa pagbibigay ng prangkisa sa ABS. Si Bibi ang parang may hinanakit pa rin. Hindi. I disagree. In-explain naman ni Madam Amy, simple lang yan. Kailangan sumunod sila. Kailangan, they have to fix it. Pero, tama naman siya. The reason, tinututulan natin ng ABS-CBN is because there's so many bad things that they have done. And there is, hindi wala kang naririnig na sorry, hindi wala kang maririnig na we'll do better. Walang ganon. Talagang, how do you call this? Incorrigible. Hindi maibago. Ito sabi ni Edwin De Sena, we should push for party list to focus on heritage and history. I agree. Kung meron tayong mga representante na nagtutulak ng matinding pag-aaral ng kasaysayan, nagpo-provide kung gumagawa ng panukalang batas ng mga batas, na nagpo-promote ng pag-aaral ng kasaysayan, paghihimay ng mga pangyayari sa atin noon, ng objective na pag-aaral ng kasaysayan at pagdi-deliver ito through various means. Hindi naman kailangan curriculum lang, hindi naman kailangan sa schools lang. Pero, even adults would like to take up history. So, the more programs are available for the study of history, the less likely, the more we create a love of country and all that. Pero, you're right. Yan yung mga party list na kailangan natin. Heritage, history, arts. Ano na yung antas ng art appreciation dito sa bansa? Ano na yung level of creativity ng Pinoy? I mean, of course, magaling tayo si Hilitan. Diyan natin nakikita yung mga creativity. Sayang. Kasi Filipinos are artistic, are creative, pero hindi tayo natututo ng mga bagong techniques, hindi nagiging sophisticated yung taste sa atin. We have some very great artists. Pero mas na-appreciate sila sa ibang bansa. Hindi natin magawa dito. Hindi natin maayos yung ating sariling entertainment industry. Kailangan makipagbrasohan pa sila dun sa mga indies. We need to have more institutional support. Ang mahal-mahal kaya ng cinema as an art. Saan tayo kukugot ng pera? We need government support. We need some kind of infrastructure to provide that support. At hindi yung parati tayong nag-handout at binibigyan natin ng sobra-sobrang daming benepisyo. Yung mga established producers, kailangan nag-create tayo ng benefits so that there are schools. The schools will be teaching it. Bata pa, na-appreciate na natin how to watch movies and what constitutes a good movie, what constitutes good art, and so on. Because it helps us think. Sabi ni Chev, hindi kaya ang villa ng Tambunting Bill ang pinapahiwatig noon ni Kuya Kim na may malaking pasabog na magaganap sa Katol Network. I already heard it from a TV group on FB. Meron nga ganon, it might be that. Ito sabi ni Francis Cayetano, gatit sila pag si Duterte nag-photo ops, pero gusto nila pag photo ops si Lenny. Sabi ni BLOOD, yung 14% pa nakatira sa 1,700 islands. Susme. Ito, sabi ni Chev, speaking of movies, MMFF 2021, which I have not actually read about too much, is heavily criticized because of not having family-friendly movies starring Vice Ganda. That's why they're having low box office sales on day one. Okay, let's talk about the Metro Manila Film Fest in general. And tomorrow we can talk about the movies that they've been presenting. Pero let's talk about that in general. The Metro Manila Film Fest, nung panahon ng mga Marcoses, the purpose was, one, to create new audiences, to help create a market for the more cutting-edge forms of cinema, to allow our producers to be able to produce yung mga sinehan na otherwise hindi tatangkilikin in the ordinary course of the year. Nag-set aside ng 2 linggo nitong Pasko during the Christmas break na very special movies ang ipapalabas. So dito pwedeng mag-introduce ng bagong techniques, pwedeng mag-introduce ng bagong means of storytelling, bagong type of cinematography, and so on. Kasi may guaranteed audience. Pag ipinag-compete ninyo yung mga artsy type na movies in the local and mainstream showings, matatalo sila. This was a way to get around yung mga mafia dyan, yung mafia and yung mga conspiracies between the theater owners and the producers. Habang tumatagal, at nawala na of course yung mga Marcoses, it became one time of the year kung saan namamayagpag yung mga local but already established producers. In other words, yung mga mayayaman, pinayaman pa natin lalo. Instead of introducing new artists, new kinds of storytelling, new kinds of techniques, helping push the industry forward, we pushed it backwards through the MMFF. Hindi sila kumikita, hindi sila makakompete. Sila yung mga biggest producers. Gusto nila, kanila pati yung Metro Manila Film Fest because of what we call the lockout clause. Yung lockout clause na yan means walang foreign films at itong mga approved films lang ng Metro Manila Film Fest ang ipapalabas, guaranteeing a market for that. Aba, gusto ng mga producers na kumikita na outside of that, dyan din kasali sila para daw makabawi sila for the rest of the year. So nawalan tuloy ng puwang yung ating mga new artists, yung ating mga new voices na nagkaroon. Later on, nang nagkaroon ng mga indie cinema, nakadiscover tayo ng new talent. But we were able to do that only because the technology changed. It became a little cheaper. Nevertheless, in spite of it all, tuloy ang pamamayagpag ng mga mainstream mga producers, well-established producers. At gusto nila, isolo nila yung 2 linggo na ito that is supposed to be reserved for the artists who would otherwise not be heard. Ngayon, itong mga sinasabi nilang maliit ang kita kasi puro artsy-artsy lang kasi hindi kasama sina Vice Ganda and all of that. That is in fact the purpose. Hindi yung purpose was to make money. The purpose was to develop an audience. Sa umpisa talaga, hindi yan kikita kasi hindi pa na-appreciate yung ganyang klaseng forms of cinema. Pero if we are consistent and persistent, we can educate the moviegoers in what constitutes good cinema. Sabi nga ni Lino Broca, hindi naman kailangan, the term before was bakya, which I find now medyo awkward. Pero hindi naman kailangan maging bakya para maging quality movie na tatangkilikin pa rin ng maramihan. Yun yung point. So, I agree that they're finally trying to raise the quality of movies here. So yung mga criticism na naririnig natin tungkol sa mga ganyan, trying to tear down the MMFF when it is trying to raise the quality of movies and of the audience, huwag tayo magpapadala dyan. Hindi pwede namang puro yung pito-pito type movies, yung walang pinag-isipan, walang plot, kanya-kanya Walang message, walang artistic value, walang quality, walang redeeming value. Hindi pwedeng ganyan ang sinehan, ang sine natin. Matatalo lang tayo at mawawalan tayo ng isang mahalagang art form na kayang-kaya sanang tangkilikan ng maramihan sa atin. Magbabalik ang Tambayan, ang oras natin 12:32 ng tanghali.
Muli nating balikan Tambayan sa DWIZ.
Nagbabalik ang Tambayan. Ako po si Trixie Cruz Angeles. Ngayon, very interesting. Maganda yung mga tanong dito sa Facebook natin. Sabi ni Katlea Waner, tama yun. Yan naman hinihingi ng Kongreso na sagutin ng ABS-CBN mga katayuan. Issue sa kanila, hindi yung babuyin lang nila. Tama. Ngayon, ang sinasabi naman dito sa isa, bakit daw hindi pinaprosecute ng gobyerno ang ABS-CBN? Alright. First, yung mga observations na ginawa doon sa Kongreso will still require evidence para ito ay i-prosecute. Those are two different things. Ang ginagawa kasi ng kabilang partner, those who are defending ABS-CBN, ang sinasabi nila is, wala namang kaso, bakit tinanggalan ng prangkisa? That's not even necessary. Ganito po kasi yun. Ang prangkisa ay isang pribilehyo. Dahil pribilehyo yan, hindi kailangan i-justify ng Kongreso kung bakit ayaw nilang bigyan. Pwede yung hindi ako nagtitiwala sa'yo. And it ends there. Kasi it's a privilege. You cannot claim, may karapatan ako, nagbigay ako ng mga requirements, bigay niyo yan sa akin. Pagkakarapatan yan, pwede kang mag-demand. Pero pag wala kang karapatan, dahil ito ay isang pribilehyo, kahit anong demand ang gawin mo, pwedeng sabihin ng Kongreso, sa ayaw ko merely a privilege. Therefore, yung mga observations na ginawa ng mga kongresista in the course of the franchise hearing, you don't even have to file a case. And no, it doesn't even have to be at the level of any criminal wrongdoing on the part of ABS-CBN. Pwede nga nilang i-deny yung franchise simply on the basis of their hegemony. Ito, parati namin sinasabi. Yung sobrang dominant ng ABS-CBN na they were virtually and actually dictating our tastes in entertainment, in fashion, even in aesthetic appearance of people. Meron kang makikita mga artista dyan na sabi sila ng sabi, ang ganda-ganda ni ganito. Pero sa totoo lang, if you're going to apply any standard of beauty, hindi siya pumapasok doon. Or even the quality of talent. Para sa kanila, sige, sexy lang, laki boobs. Sexy, ganyan, maskulado, whatever, aesthetically pleasing. Para sa kanila, magaling na artista na yan. What? Based on face value? Yung mga ganong klaseng skewed values natin and skewed appreciation of what constitutes talent is in large part the doing of ABS-CBN. Is this something we can sue them for? Probably not. Okay, and most likely not. We can sue them, however, for having too many radio stations, too many television stations, too many everything in violation of the law and which guaranteed their hegemony. Umandar ba yung Competitiveness Commission? Hindi. Umandar ba ang NTC? Hindi din. Now, if those two agencies aren't going to get a move on, we don't think that any case will actually be filed. The BIR says they're still conducting an investigation and assessment. But that is all beside the point. The point is that the franchise is a privilege and it can be denied, even if they weren't doing anything. Congress can deny it simply because they were too strong, too loud, had too much. Because that's not how democracy works. You cannot have a single voice. A single voice is a dictatorship. Whether that dictatorship is somebody who occupies a position in national office or a television station, it's still a dictatorship. They dictate tastes, they dictate values, and yes, there is a time when they were actually dictating who we're going to vote for. And because we don't know any better, there are very few people who will take apart itong mga strategy nila noon. Wala pang social media na tumatabla sa kanila o nagpapresenta ng alternatiba, tuloy-tuloy yung kanilang dominance. So again, para dun sa mga nagsasabi, bakit wala pang kaso ang ABS-CBN? Bakit? Kailangan ba ng may kaso sila para tanggalan sila ng prangkisa? No. All it requires is for Congress to lose trust in them. Yung mga medyo bloodthirsty dyan, naghahanap ng kaso, it might take a while. Because sino ang mag-file? The congressmen, yes, we can demand kasi sinasabi nila gano'n. Pero It's not even their obligation to do that. The point is that ABS-CBN is, words na naman, deleterious. They're bad for us. They're bad for us because they want to be the dominant and almost sole voice, and ang gulang nila. Tignan niyo kung ganong kagulang. Lampas-lampas sila sa allowed radio stations. 5 lang ang nasa batas, ilan ang radio stations nila. I don't know what kind of magic they were using in calculating that. Might be a Lenny Robredo type of math. I don't know. Ilan ang television stations? They actually were using 2 networks. And they were buying up airtime in other areas. In other words, without us being aware of it, all we were hearing was the opinion of the Lopez family and the Lopez interests. So if somebody says, walang kaso ang ABS-CBN pero tinanggalan niyo ng prangkisa, hindi po kailangan ng kaso. Kitang-kita naman yung panggugulang nila. They don't even have to violate the law. If they're bad for us, that franchise can be denied. If Congress loses trust in them, that franchise can be denied. If there is a public clamor for them not to have a franchise, if our congressmen are true representatives, they would listen to us and deny them a franchise simply because we said so. That's how it works. That's why it is called a privilege and not a right. So, yan ang hindi sinasabi ng mga nasa kabilang parlor o ng mga tao nagtutulak na ibalik nga ito. Meanwhile, maraming salamat kay Rene Braga Baingco. Nagpadala siya ng queso de bola. Uy! Maraming salamat din kay Ma'am Ida Galdiano. Nagpadala naman siyang super sticker. Hi! Ayan. Sabi ni LMX, do you think that we should keep the foreign movie ban this time of the year? Do you agree or disagree that the absence of foreign competition is the main cause our local films deterioration comes from MMFF season? No! The lockout clause was for the purpose of creating movies that would raise the level of our audience. It's about developing audiences. And you cannot develop audiences if you're not going to present them with alternatives. Now, foreign movies, as we all know, you have to go back to what cinema is. Cinema is an art form. It is also a cultural expression. And like any cultural expression or vehicle, such as language, dala-dala niyan values nung mga nag-create nun, nung kultura na nag-create nun. Yung mga high-powered crashes, disaster movies, action movies with all of these car chases, that is a very American perspective and a very Americanized form of cultural expression. We like it. It's highly entertaining. But without knowing it, we're imbibing their cultural expression, imbibing those cultural values. That is why it is necessary for us to develop our own voice in our own cinema. And that is part of the reason also for the lockout clause. Yun yung dahilan. Bakit hindi tayo nag-allow? Only for 2 weeks out of the entire year, maybe 2.5 weeks, wala tayong foreign. And it's only sa mga sinehan. Yung mga online, hindi naman natin kayang i-lock out. May Netflix pa rin, merong whatever it is that have pirated versions of anything else. Andun pa rin. Tuloy yung pamamayagpag. For those who have cable TV, may cable TV pa rin. You're only locking out the foreign films from the cinemas. Is that too much to ask? 2.5 weeks out of the entire year. Para lang makapag-develop tayo ng audience. But it's only MMFF. Hindi naman pwedeng standalone na MMFF lang undertakes this entire burden of developing a Philippine audience. Meron tayong mga cultural agencies that I think really should be doing more work. Kulang pa. We have the Film Development Council, which really should need a bigger budget. It should be doing more outreach, doing more stuff, but which is not an indictment of any of the leadership of FDCP. As a matter of fact, they're doing a lot with what they have, but it's not enough. It has to be just more. Sabi ni Ma'am Ida Galdiano, I love what you're saying about these cultural things which should be our source of pride. Yes, thank you. Sabi ni Clark Sam, parang walang pinagkaiba sa pambuli, wala tayong no choice. Correct. Now we have the choice. Social media nagkalat, may pagbabatayan na tayo. Kaya 20 weeks pa lang para na ako nag-online. Salamat. Pero natatawa naman ako doon. Okay. So, may nagsabi, Vice Ganda is not entertainment. Oh, I disagree. I think she is entertaining. But as to whether the quality, or as to what quality that entertainment is, that's the one where you can make a value judgment. Pero kung sa entertaining, I think a lot of people find her entertaining. And come on, we have to respect that. But it's also indicative din siya. Bakit namamayagpag yung ganun na form of entertainment? Because a lot of people have not yet learned to appreciate other forms. Hindi pa nagde-develop ng more sophisticated tastes. And we haven't done that because yung namamayagpag are the mainstream ones, the well-established producers who, they just want to give us what we want. That's their formula. That's their marketing formula. That's for their formula for success. But what we want isn't always necessarily good for us. Diba? Parang yung bata, gustong-gusto na puro candy lang ang kakainin. That's bad for them. So we provide the nutritious food. It has to be made available to the child. In the same way that if the audience was left to its own devices without being taught to develop more sophisticated tastes, then we will always have Vice Ganda quality entertainment. We will be stuck there. But look, I'd like to point out, look at Bollywood. Yung quality ng cinema nila, hindi ganun kataas when they started, but they were churning out a lot of movies. The Indians, they love movies. They go to movies, they parati nilang tinatangkilik, they go to it in droves. So, eventually, Hollywood took notice of that kasi they had a very successful market. And so, they even would introduce elements of Bollywood into Hollywood films. Don't forget yung, ano ba yan? What's that movie about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Yung mga ganyan. So, they stayed true to their culture, but they were able to develop it commercially and make it commercially viable. Even the influx of foreign movies did not affect yung pagtangkilik nila sa local cinema nila. That's the difference between them and us. Sila kasi, matindi yung kapit nila sa national identity nila. Tayo, sabog. But it didn't happen purely by accident. Colonization does that to us, and colonization that is deleterious. To begin with kasi, unlike India, colonized by the British, they retained their identity. Tayo, colonized by Spain, colonized by the US, with a few years of occupation by Japan. What happened? To begin with, Filipinos have no xenophobia or very little xenophobia, very, very little. And as a result of that, we're always welcoming of foreign ideas, new ideas. It's part of our culture. It's part of our makeup. In many instances, ang tingin natin dun sa ibang mga foreign is necessarily better. Ay, imported yan. Oy, branded yan. Ganyan. To the point that some of our fast food are branded so that they look like they're imported and actually they're local. Yung parang ganun, we have to deny our Philippine-ness para bumenta. We also have to study how it is that those other countries maintain a strong national identity so that the local industries, they have a chance as against the foreign ones. So, huwag kayong mabibigla that there are Filipino first policies, even in the economic provisions of our constitution. Part of the reason is because we're always so welcoming, so biased in favor of the imported ones, in favor of the foreign ones, sometimes to the point of senselessness. And so it was necessary at some time to put a stop to that just for so long, so that it allows us time to develop our own industries, allows us time to develop our national identity, make a stronger, more cohesive nation, so that we can ensure the success of local industries. That's the history of that. That's part of the history of that. Yan, sabi ni Chev, even the Korean movie industry is now recognized internationally. Example, Parasite. Pak! Diba? Yes, K-pop, ganyan. They stay to, do you remember the Korean telenovelas? Ang dami sa kanila about the Joseon period. Do you know that Korea was so devastated after the war? Ang dami sa kanilang mga heritage na nasunog, nawala. Talagang hindi nalala. They have to do ang tindi ng mga research yung kailangan nilang gawin to recover. And para dun sa ibang hindi nila ma-recover, they just reconstruct. As long as meron silang na ipapakita na may heritage sila. Tayo ang dami-dami natin, but we're still in the act of destroying it. Yun yung difference. So, sabi ni LMX, our local film industry is not helping themselves in order to get more audience. Rather than try to produce good films, they stick to the status quo and produce crappy movies, then they let the cycle perpetuate. I agree. They're driven, of course, by capitalism, by the desire to make money, which isn't a bad thing. Pero when you're affecting public policy that is built to help everybody, themselves included, medyo that's where we have a problem. RJ 2002 PH said, yung CCP nga pala natin, yung stage play need din mag-progress. We need more venues. Now that's what I like about the Marcos years is that they put culture and arts front and center. Naalala niyo yung kasaysayan ng lahi. Pag Independence Day, may parada. There was always something. There were many means and creative means to bring to us an awareness of our culture, our history, and all that. Now, of course, there's criticism of how it was presented, what was presented, and all that, which is fine. Okay lang. Criticize it whatever you want. But the fact is that, hello, live ako. Sorry. But the fact is that they made an effort. And they started it. The conservation law, The conservation law was created in 1968. 1968. Can you imagine? Way ahead of time. The conservation awareness only here in the Philippines in, would you believe, 2001. Yung awareness, yung talagang solid awareness and all that. Give me 1 second. Ayan. Sorry. Malapit na rin naman tayo matapos. Only 6 minutes to go. Ayan. That's why Asian entertainment, sabi ni Chev, such as Korean and Chinese dramas and Japanese anime are dominating on online streaming platforms like Netflix. Yes. They've stuck to their culture. Ang pinipresenta nila sa atin, kultura nila. Guys, give me a second or so. Okay. Sorry. Sorry, I had to, may construction kasi dito sa bahay. Okay. Ayun, sabi ni Ma'am Ida, oh no, please don't allow our cultural heritage. We're very rich actually in terms of culture and arts. That's true. Now, here's the thing. Ang dami-dami nating talents, diba? And they find their niche elsewhere. Isn't there some way that we can get our artists to stay here? Isn't there some way that we can encourage also Filipino writers, Filipino playwrights and all of that to be able to do it here? If we don't have MMFF type of projects, then we're going to lose even that. Yun. So, you know how Korea did it? They just focused on their entertainment industry. They threw money at it. They did so many things for it. China, their yung movie making nila, it's state run. So they were able to produce yung Ang Lee level types of movies. nagko-compete sila. And now they have a flourishing fashion industry and all that. Why? Because creativity, once it is encouraged, will find different forms of expression. Hindi lang sa sine. Magkakaroon ng mas artistic yung mga damit natin. We will create visual artists. Music. We're such a musical nation. It is such a shame to waste it. Diba? Sweden, what they do is they teach music in all levels of schooling. Maaga pa lang they're asked to choose an instrument or number of instruments, and that is taught to them, all at state expense. And look, with the success of ABBA after that, there's almost always somebody who is of Swedish origin or a Swede who is producing or making music for the world. Hindi lang masyadong halata because they're not going to beat their chests and say, oh, Sweden ang gumawa niyan. So, yun yung that wag nating kakalimutan that essential to the health of the nation is the health of our creative industries. Naging about the MMFF. The MMFF, even if sabihin nila low ang turnout, low ang returns, that's not an indictment. Believe it or not, it isn't always about money. It is about making sure that these things are created and then developing audiences for it. Do you know also that the other way to develop an audience is to make sure hindi parating libre? Hindi dapat nagiging libre yung mga plays and all that. Kasi ang nasa isip ng mga tao is that wala siyang value. Kaya binibigyan niya ng libre. We educate people into paying for the arts. Hindi dapat tayo pumapayag na yung mga banda natin sinasabihan sila ng mga nagde-develop ng mga, alam mo yan, yung mga performance venues, yung mga bars, ganyan. Sasabihin nila, we can give you exposure, di na lang namin kayo papayaran. These things are horrible. They're going to kill our artists. Dapat ang tingin natin, binabayaran ang artistic work. That is part of developing an audience. Teaching people to pay for art because may cost yan. May pinasok na, may talent. We pay for the talent. We pay for the creativity. We pay for the effort. We pay for the materials. Hindi pwedeng nagpapalibre parati tayo sa ating audience. Because otherwise, hindi yan na-appreciate. Pag binigay lang sa'yo ng libre yan, sa tingin mo ma-appreciate niya. Well, bagay, mahilig ang Pinoy sa libre. Pero it doesn't educate them in the value of what they just watched. Yan, sabi ni Steffi L, yes, yung period dramas ng Korea, effective sa awareness ng mga tao about heritage. And it isn't just Koreans, but the world over na tuturuan ang taong bayan ang mga tao all over the world to appreciate Korean culture. Now BTS is at the top of the charts worldwide. Worldwide. It would not have been possible a decade ago. And right now, even people who don't understand the lyrics of the songs that they're singing fully appreciate the boy band. The fully appreciate them. BTS. It's something for us to consider. Yeah. Maraming salamat sa pagsubaybay sa tambayan nitong araw na ito. Ang tabayanan ang susunod na programa. Hindi ko pa po alam kung ano yung susunod na programa. Yo, guys, so maraming salamat. Pilipinas ngayon na with Ma'am Marupa Hatisar, with Yusek Robert Rivera and Lady Eliza, kung hindi ako nagkakamali. Maraming salamat sa pagsubaybay. Huwag pong kakalimutan. Like, share, follow, and subscribe din dito sa atin sa Luminous. We'll see you tomorrow on Karambola, 8 to 10 ng umaga. Ako po si Trixie Cruz Angeles.
Tambayan sa DWIZ.